Welcome to the voices of transparency and excellence. We're not pivoting, the world is spinning like a top. Let's stop, figure things out, get some answers. Come with us on this ride. Warm regards, Rick and Judi.
Welcome to our podcast series where we address crucial topics impacting our campus and community. I'm Judi Clarke, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Rick Gatteau, and today we are focusing on the state of research and grants in our podcast. And so with us is Nina Maung-Gaona, Senior Associate Vice President for Research Development and Partnerships at Stony Brook University, and Alfredo Fontanini, Co-Director of Stony Brook University's Neurosciences Institute and Chair of the Department of Neurobiology and Behavior. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to be here.
Fantastic. Research science, it often takes places kind of insularly within the lab, within the field, and so on. And so science communication has been an ongoing challenge of how do we translate these really incredibly complex research questions that we're trying to answer, and then translate that to the general public that understands it from a kitchen table perspective. What does this mean? Public institutions, public good, public dollars. How are our research public dollars being communicated more effectively to our community so they understand what this investment is doing? Alfredo, let's start with you.
Yes, so the way I think about what research does, research generates new knowledge, and new knowledge is the foundation for new technologies that change everyday's life, health, experiences. And what we do here at Stony Brook and what we do in all the academic institutions in this country, we build this bedrock of knowledge and we start putting the pillars to build the new technologies. So this is the fundamental of what we do. And that's why it's so unsettling when the two are separated, because without these foundations of knowledge, there's nothing where these pillars of technology can lay on.
And Nina, from your perspective, can you also talk a little bit about some of the discoveries that have come out that people are using day to day?
Sure. I think in the perspective of just safety of Americans, right? There's so much research happening at Stony Brook on a range of safety topics. For example, battery storage safety. That's critical today in terms of the resilient electric grid. The security of the electric grid. There's cyber attacks, and we have researchers that are looking at how to make a secure electric grid. We also have research at the forefront of transportation safety, as well as secure communications using quantum technology. We have researchers that are at the forefront of global technology around that area. We also have research that is all around the health protection of the health of Americans. We have research going on in cancer, reproductive health, diabetes. You may know that at Stony Brook University, researchers were at the forefront of discovering the causative agent of Lyme disease. And that was fundamental. You know, at Long Island, we struggle so much with tick-borne illnesses. And that's a national issue, but particularly on Long Island, it's been a big issue. We also are the home of the discovery of the MRI technology, which is so fundamental to diagnostics and therapeutics, you know, in terms of healthcare. So there are so many really important discoveries, both for the health and safety of all Americans, happening here at Stony Brook.
And to follow up on Judy's question, one of our earlier podcasts actually was around communication. And I'm curious to connect that podcast to this conversation around the American public and how American universities either are or could be doing better of communicating research outcomes so the American public sees value in what college and universities are researching. So in your experience, is there a disconnect? Where are we in today's society related to the average American's understanding of what college and universities do in the research realm?
I think that's actually something that Stony Brook is really doing a phenomenal job at doing. We have the Alan Alda Center for Science Communication right here. It is providing so much training for, really the entire U.S. and global population around communicating science. Our researchers, that means our students, our faculty members, have access to the training and they're able to get training on communicating their science to the general public. to legislators, which is really critical, and also in the training and mentoring of their own students. So I think that this is something that Stony Brook is very conscious of, the importance of communicating research to the general public, and I think it's something that we have the infrastructure to do.
And we also saw over the past, I would say, 5-10 years, a pretty significant cultural shift in the way in which young scientists see their role. And my generation, I'm 53, someone would communicate or someone wouldn't, was up to the person, whereas I'm seeing our grad students, for instance, in the program of neuroscience, but in many of our graduate programs, being really drivers of communication. They love to be out in libraries, in fairs, in the field, connecting with people and making their research significant for everyone's life. And they see that as an integral part of them being scientists. And so I'm incredibly hopeful, and it's very energizing to see these new generations of graduate students.
Can I go back to I'm curious though, thinking about, again, the average American who goes to the doctor's office, for example, and there's technology that is basically a diagnostic tool, for example. What I'm wondering is, are people connecting the dots between that basically helps either their life be better or live a longer, healthier life, connected back to research that actually occurred even in the college university setting? My sense is there is a disconnect. Do you think that's accurate? How do we help fill that gap then? You mentioned the younger folks who maybe are more adept at communication around the research they're doing, but I just get the sense that people to also understand that research as a building block, that these are not overnight discoveries. These are decades in the making. What are some pieces that college is going to take ownership in terms of helping ensure that the American public understands the research process, outcomes, that what you have access to is the result of research that's been done many times at a college or university setting?
I think you're right. There is a disconnect. I don't know the degree of that disconnect, but for example, do everyday Americans know that such a large percentage, maybe 40% of the medications that are on the market today were started at university laboratories, right? Do I know that that's a common knowledge? No, I don't. But I do know that there is a conscious effort, at least at Stony Brook, to kind of build that bridge to communicating with the public. Could we do better? Yeah, I think that's really important, especially today, given just how much fundamental research is happening at university labs and how they translate.
I completely agree with Nina, and I think that this is where true partnerships, intellectual partnerships between the public and the private can help us all. I think, and I'm a little bit worried that in the past 10, 15 years, universities have focused on highlighting the impact and the importance of the fundamental discoveries that were done in universities, and companies focused on the impact of building and translating those discoveries in daily technologies. I think that time in which it's the divide et impera, where we're dividing our roles, has come to an end. We really need to have conversations in how we go out and we talk about how important that partnership has been in driving the past 30, 40 years of innovation. And it is really a cultural matter. And unfortunately, in times of limited resources and debate about the relevance of science and technology, it becomes much harder to create those partnerships. But that's what we need to pursue.
So, Alfredo, I'm going to continue with you. And I think we make assumptions that when we say research, everyone knows what we're talking about. And so you're a research scientist and chair of the Department of Neurobiology and Behavior. And so can you take us a little bit, let's drill down, can you take us a little bit into the research model? How do you come up with a question? How do you answer the question? What does it look like, even creating a research agenda?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you?
Well, I mean, how you come up with a question is the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Is how you come up with ideas. I think ideas spark based on conversations, and so it's incredibly important to keep investing in our communities. The spark based on reading a lot, and having some time to build creative bridges. And also, interesting questions come from research. We all know the same papers. We all talk together about the same topics. What always throw us in very innovative fields are the unexpected data. We're doing some experiments, and there are some unexpected results. And we go off and we try to understand them, and we try to build on them. And that's a great source of creativity. And so it's all really about bringing people together, and in communities where there can be a free exchange of ideas, making resources available for disseminating knowledge, and having resources for doing experiments, for doing models, for really creating new knowledge.
And Nina, you provide in your office, like the research development and the partnership and the structure and so on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing I want to piggyback on something that Alfredo said that's so important is that community, the science community. And at Stony Brook, that's a very special science community for important reasons. Infrastructurally, Stony Brook has been a Research One institution for decades, right?
What does that mean,
Research One basically is a classification of the research volume and the research activity happening at universities. And Research One is the highest classification you can have. And so Stony Brook is a Research One institution. But in addition to that, what's important is that Stony Brook has a state hospital, a medical center right here on campus. And also Stony Brook co-manages Brookhaven National Lab. So we have a Department of Energy lab 20 minutes, east of us. We also share graduate students with Cold Spring Harbor Lab, which is 30 minutes, west of us. And then we have a state hospital. So what's important about the environment and what's exciting about the work we do in the Office of Proposal Development is that we have a rich set of research happening, such a vast array of research happening that provides an incredible environment for interdisciplinary work. And I think that that's something that makes Stony Brook unique and also something that makes it exciting to do research development, which essentially is supporting faculty members in their research endeavors by helping them either to pursue particular funding opportunities, whether that's federal or otherwise, finding partners for what they do, whether those are industry partners or other universities or non-for-profit organizations. So it's the work around helping them to create an ecosystem around them to really bring their ideas, to the forefront.
I was curious to follow up on that. Can you talk through, for folks who are not aware, what does the grant writing proposal process look like? It's interesting. You were just sharing about bringing, whether it's industry partners, other collaborators, and I'm sure people want to find a multitude of talents to create the best proposals given areas of expertise. But walk through what that process looks like, and if different funding agencies operate differently. Just curious for folks like me who don't know that process.
Well, from the point of view of a researcher, and I can speak about my area, that is neuroscience, so we're mostly funded by NIH, but also by a little bit NSF and DOD. And I'm going to talk about proposals that are mostly centered around one or two or three investigators. Nina has great experience, and here at Stony Brook we have a phenomenal of administrative support for building large proposal, and so I'm going to let Nina talk about the large proposal. But from the point of view of the single or dual investigator, the grant writing process, there's the mechanics of really writing the grant. You need to write basically a 10, 12 pages proposal that is structured in a certain way. Basically, you need to propose what are the goals of your research. You need to provide a compelling scientific rationale. You need to describe the experiments and the logical flow and the caveats. If something doesn't work, how are you going to respond to that? And so that part is relatively straightforward. Once you have an idea and it's well documented, you can, depending on how fast of a writer you can be, it can be a couple of weeks or a 2 months process. The part that is really the currency of many of the current proposals, and that actually takes a lot of time and resources, are the preliminary data. Each proposal needs to have a set of preliminary results that support the feasibility, the technical and conceptual feasibility of the idea. And so those preliminary data often can take up to a year to be collected. And so the way I see the writing of the proposal is always the tip of the iceberg of this immense amount of work, which is time and resource intensive.
Stony Brook has been incredibly successful in having single investigator or sort of smaller collaborations between investigators. And I think one of the things we've been working on in the Office of Research and Innovation has been trying to build a culture on really large collaborations. And these are typically in response to very high-risk, high-reward funding opportunities. We're talking about $25, $50, $100 million. And they require complex partnerships, and sort of different components that are really shifting our culture. We have established in the Office of Research and Innovation a Sea Grant program that really provides investigators an opportunity to do the proof of concept or the preliminary data work. And this is really important for investigators that want to try new collaborations or maybe even pivot a little bit their line of inquiry, their research areas, or try new partnerships, et cetera. And our Sea Grant program, which started about maybe 7 years ago, has been tremendously successful. We have over a 9-to-1 return on investment in terms of what faculty members or researchers want to try and what ultimately they were able to do in terms of bringing research dollars to support that in a larger scale.
Interesting. Wow.
And that seed funding, and the community at Stony Brook is grateful for the institutional support for that. It's fundamental because between the spark and the ability to put that spark into a proposal, there's these proof of concept experiments that if you don't have someone investing on a high risk junction, you're not going to be able to collect. And so those seed funds are incredibly important. That's something that we often talk with philanthropists about the importance of seeding the high risk, high reward junctions of research. Once you have the preliminary data, if they're compelling, now I'm going to say an hyperbole, but the grant almost writes itself, and it's going to be a strong grant, but it's getting there. That is the critical part.
Sometimes it's a research or the researchers generated question. And sometimes it's a question that industry, government, communities are grappling with. Mm-hmm. And we call that knowledge transfer. So there are questions that our partners external to the university will come and say, I want to partner with you on answering this complex question that we don't have the resources for or the time to actually unpack this complexity. So can you talk a little bit about what it means for kind of the we call it knowledge transfer, where industries and government and businesses and communities are coming to the university asking for partnership and answering and conducting research to answer these complex questions?
Sure. So the National Science Foundation created a directorate that's really looking at this, the Technology, Innovation, and Partnership Directors, all around use-inspired research. Yep. It's exactly what you're saying, the idea that industry is struggling with some kind of issue, and it needs more research to be done. On whatever that issue might be. And so the partnerships, so we call this cross-sector partnerships, right? So industry collaborating with universities to try to tackle a problem. That is absolutely critical, right? Because it downstream, when you think about what is really, in terms of commercialization, yes, right? What is exactly the barrier to that commercialization? So universities and industry partnering to really address that really kind of streamlines that process to commercialization. But I think it's still really important to acknowledge that not all research is on the commercialization, right? Research on, blue skies research, what many people refer to as blue skies research, is the pursuit of knowledge. The pursuit of knowledge that is so fundamental to, understanding the world we live in. And sometimes there isn't that clear commercialization or translation impact for that. And so we have to have both, especially if we do everything that's industry driven. So think about the fact that a lot of the fundamental knowledge that we have actually de-risks at the commercialization. So we don't want to create something that we think automatically there's going to be a commercialization application, because if industry there could be a lot of costs involved in that.
Can you give an example?
Fundamental to that. There could be some technologies on, for example, we struggle right now a lot with trying to think about how to make secure electric grid, research. But we may need to sort of have a fundamental understanding of the materials that go into all of the different technologies. Then it might not be automatically clear what the translational impact of that is, but we need to have a good understanding of all of the materials research that goes into it, into some of the technologies.
And I think it depends also from sector to sector. There are some sectors, applied sciences, that are more naturally inclined at tackling societal, well-defined consensus problems, societal challenges. And then there are other sectors where researchers just need to continue expanding the boundaries of knowledge. I think one of the great experiences of being in this country, particularly for someone who was born elsewhere, is living with this sense that this is a country that existed as a frontier. And it was a physical frontier at some point, and now we're no longer a physical frontier, but we're becoming a frontier, explorers of the frontier of knowledge. And I think that has to be an intrinsic part of universities. Getting back to Earth, on more specific issues to the biomedical sciences, I think partnerships with industry and biomedical sciences can be thought and have been pretty fruitful in the domain of drug discovery, which brings together lines of sites that involve chemistry, various basic science disciplines, and then clinical departments and clinical trials. Very innovative drugs are being tested constantly, and those require partnerships with exceptional clinicians who are capable of running clinical trials. And so those are perhaps, I think, the two areas in biomedical sciences where I can see more fruitful collaborations with private partners.
I love hearing the passion in your voices for the work that you do. I'm just curious, too, with the changing federal landscape, how have you seen that impact research on a national level and more particularly at Stony Brook?
Well, we are seeing termination of grants, right? And so that was to be expected given some of the executive orders that we saw, but also the changes in the budgets for the federal agencies. And since a big bulk of our research enterprise at Stony Brook is funded by federal grants. And so our Office of Research and Innovation is really the interface between the faculty members and the federal agencies themselves. So we are seeing, terminations. We're also seeing other things. For example, delays in setting up, getting new awards, for example, or delays in, hearing back on no cost extension. So these are very practical matters that faculty members, that have awards or applying for applying for new grants are really facing. So there are some real challenges around that. And of course, you can imagine just how gut-wrenching it is for faculty members that receive a termination notice, what that could feel like, what that feels like for them, because this is their work. It's the work of their students. It's their work of their research laboratories. So that is obviously a really devastating impact. Thankfully, we from what we can tell, we're not at very large numbers at Stony Brook, especially compared to what we're hearing sort of nationally. And so that is at least some good news. Like, we're not seeing these huge amount of terminations. That's not to take away from those that are experiencing those terminations. We need to work with the faculty members, particularly those that have students that are impacted or postdoctoral trainees that are impacted. And I think our Vice President for Research, Kevin Gardner, has been hosting these town halls with the research community. They are attended by like 300 to 400, researchers on campus every time we have them. And there's dialogue on the community. There's support, on the, in these calls and conversations about what's important. And he announced that there was going to be, an emergency fund that would help to bridge the students and the trainees that were affected by these terminations. So the university is taking action. And so we have to operate both on a tactical level and a strategic level, right? On the tactical level, we have to deal with, the terminations or other kind of notices, and we have to think very fast about how to align with new priorities that are coming out so that we can support our research community to continue. And for those that may find that, the federal government may not be a source of funding for some of that work, we're going to have to work to find other sources of funding because the work has to continue. It's important work. But on the other hand, on the strategic level, we have so much support for that, right? So we have a phenomenal federal and state relations office, right? We have a federal firm, McAllister and Quinn, that we're working with to provide guidance on things. We work a lot because we're a state university and we're the research foundation. We work a lot with the Research Foundation Central Office, and SUNY works a lot, closely with the New York Attorney General. So we have a lot of guidance in sort of navigating this, especially since it's still not clear what the policies are going to be and how things are going. Every agency is sort of handling this differently. So we still need time to kind of maneuver both tactically and strategically in response to these changes.
Yes, and departments and universities are very comfortable with uncertainty. We know how to build airplanes as they fly. What is difficult for researchers and for departments is fast-changing news in opposing directions. In a way, the past 3 months reminded a little bit to me of COVID. I'm a COVID chair, so a year after I was chair, COVID hit. And I had to learn to be a department chair and also help managing the COVID situation. And at the time, I remember that at the very beginning, what I was trying to do is react to all the information that was coming out in search of being fast and adaptive. And then instead, I realized that there's wisdom in letting news, letting event play out a little bit with calm, monitoring them, but denoising the day-to-day grind and understand where's the macroscopic direction. So we are going to adapt. Right now it's very difficult because things are moving in every other direction pretty much every day and every week. But I think that with the support of a strong university and with the inspiration of the fact that all of our students, all of our researchers know what to do and how to do it, I think we will be able to navigate this situation.
And I think the beauty in what both of you just shared is with the challenges and with the tactical strategies and with the muscle memory of knowing how to do the research, we're also modeling this for our emerging researchers and for our newer hired research faculty and so on. And we're still answering these incredibly wicked problems that are challenging us through humanity, through efficiency systems, security, healthcare, comma. So the questions didn't leave just because the challenges presented themselves. And I think that should be the takeaway is in all the things that we're doing right now, we're still doing the good work. And that has to be the story. The challenge is there, 100%, but we're still doing the good work. We're still answering the wicked problems that are keeping people up at night. So I think that is a beautiful takeaway from our discussion today.
Well, Nina and Alfredo, we just want to thank you so much for your time and the insights you shared with us. We really appreciate it. And just want to let our listeners know to join us next time as we explore another topic, news literacy. But for now, I'm Rick Gatteau.
And I'm Judi Brown Clarke, and thank you for tuning in.